saving a stranger from a bad husband. Friday night, I was a little annoyed by an unusual event my husband and I attended. Allegedly, it was a retirement party for one of his co-workers, but we had been there for quite some time, and although I recognized some of his co-workers, the guest of honor was out of the question. One of the reasons for my displeasure was that my husband didn't seem to pay much attention to me, and I'm not the highest opinion of my looks, so I felt a little insecure. However, what surprised me was that many of the men in the place seemed to be looking in my direction, and there was no disgust on their faces. The main reason for my displeasure, however, was the attitude my husband Jerry had taken since we confirmed that I was pregnant about 3 weeks ago. I was now probably in my 11th week. Since I usually have a completely flat stomach, and I was wearing a tight dress, you could already see the beginning growing belly. When Jerry and I discussed having children before we were married, he was in complete agreement. Although this pregnancy wasn't exactly planned, there were problems with my birth control pills being ineffective due to a medication I was taking for a medical condition that my doctor hadn't explained to me could affect my pills. We had been married for over 3 years, so it wasn't anything close to a disaster. However, from the moment he found out I was pregnant, he was cold and detached and never expressed any joy about my situation. On the other hand, despite Jerry's behavior, I was excited about the pregnancy and felt great. Since Jerry was sitting at our table with 2 of his buddies and talking only to them, ignoring me, I left my glass, 3/4 full of soda and lime, and went to the restroom. When I returned, my husband and his buddies were gone. I sighed, then picked up the glass, but before I could bring it to my lips, a stranger approached me, though I vaguely remembered seeing him before, and said, "I'm not sure you should drink this until I tell you what I saw." The pseudonym was a very good-looking guy about 6 inches taller than me, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a delightful dimple on his chin. He was one of the guys at the next table who seemed to be eyeing me during the evening. Still holding my soda glass in my hand, I asked, "What did you see?" "After you moved away from the table, 2 guys moved away too, and then a 3rd guy looked sneaky and came over to your side of the table and, although I'm not 100% sure, I thought he put something in your drink," Mr. Dimple said with a look of genuine concern on his face. "What was that guy?" I asked. Mr. Dimple looked around and then discreetly pointed about 20 feet to my right where 3 guys and a girl were talking. "Tall guy from that group by the drinks table wearing a blue shirt." "In a blue shirt and black pants? With long brown hair and a mustache?" I asked, feeling my stomach roll up to my throat. "Yes, that's him," he replied. It was my husband, Jerry. Seeing the look of horror on my face, Mr. Dimple said, "I don't want to scare you, but whoever he is, he has no reason to put anything in your drink. If I were you, I would transfer your drink to a takeout container, check it, and get another drink." Apparently seeing even more horror on my face, he asked, "Who is this guy?" "He's my husband," I replied in a sort of surrendered voice, though I could feel tears coming to my eyes. Jerry had absolutely no reason to put anything in my drink. And then a truly horrible thought struck me. I must have looked like I was about to faint because Mr. Dimple said, "Can I help you? All the color's gone from your face." I pulled myself together as best I could, then held out my hand and said, "I'm Pauline Bradley. What's your name?" I didn't want to keep calling him Mr. Dimple, even if it was only in my imagination. "Carson Van Witt," he replied, squeezing my hand tightly. "I really appreciate you telling me about this, Carson. Do you think I could borrow a food container from the bartender and then get the hell out of here with your help?" "I'd be happy to help a hot pregnant woman like you," he grinned, still holding my hand. "Just so you don't worry. Since I'm a stranger, here's my driver's license," he continued, pulling out his wallet and taking out his license after finally letting go of my hand. "Take a picture of my license and send it to a friend. Then I'll give you a ride." I smiled and did as he asked, texting my sister and my friend Angela with the caption, "This guy is giving me a ride home." I then smiled at him and said, "Let's go." I walked over to the bar, grabbed a glass with a lid, and reached into my purse to pull out a couple bucks to tip the bartender. Carson beat me to it, handing him a $5 and receiving a sincere thank you in return. Carson waved at the other people he was sitting with. I let Carson pass in front of me, whispering, "I'll see you outside." I stopped when I bumped into one of Jerry's co-workers and told him, "I can't find Jerry and I'm sick. Please tell him I have to go and I'll see him at home." Carson was waiting for me outside. I walked with him about half a block to a black Corvette with chrome wheels parked on the street, which lit up when Carson pressed the key fob, and I got into the passenger seat. "Nice wheels," I smiled as he got into the car, buckling his seatbelt. We chatted sweetly as he drove me the 6 miles to my house. I learned that he worked in pharmaceuticals. No surprise, since he was good-looking and had a degree in chemistry from Amherst, one of the most prestigious colleges in the United States. I told him I worked as an electrical engineer at IBM, which made him raise his eyebrows and chuckle. "I've never seen an engineer like you before." "You mean pregnant?" I smiled. "Yes," he laughed, since we both knew that's not what he meant, but it helped my ego a lot. I had no qualms directing him to my house. After all, I had texted his driver's license, which definitely had his picture on it, to 2 other people. When he pulled up to my house, I thanked him for the ride, and he mentioned that he was going back to his friend's bar-restaurant. However, before he drove out while my door was still open, he said, "The lab that can test your drink and will give you the best service at the lowest price is LabCorp at 7th and Wilson downtown. My company uses them for all their lab needs." "Thanks again, Carson Van Vliet," I smiled. "I'll definitely give them a try." I then closed the door and stared after him as he drove away, driving much faster than when he was taking me in the car. As I walked up the stairs to the front door, I wondered why I was so horny. "It must be the pregnancy," I muttered to myself. When I got home, I removed the remaining half-melted ice cubes and lime wedge from my drink, transferred the liquid into a more convenient container, and then set the container on the back of the refrigerator in case whatever substance Jerry had added, Carson had no reason to lie about it, required refrigeration to remain viable. I was already asleep when Jerry got home, and over the course of the weekend I was careful to socialize with him, trying not to eat or drink anything he offered or gave me. Surprisingly, he didn't question me about leaving the party early, apparently accepting my sick excuse. Perhaps he expected that what he'd slipped into my drink would have that effect. On Monday, I carved out a few spare minutes at lunchtime and took my container to LabCorp. The technician taking the analysis asked what I wanted it tested for. "Anything that could harm a person. I suspect someone put something in my drink at the bar," was my reply. "Such a broad test can be expensive, maybe $500, and we need $200 up front," she said. "Do what you have to do," I replied, and gave her my credit card to charge the $200 advance. After processing, she said it would take about a week, and I gave her my work email address to send her the results. I had a very uncomfortable week with Jerry, although I think I was a good enough actor that he didn't pick up on how much emotional discomfort I was experiencing. Sometimes, though, he looked at me with a strange, expectant look. On Friday at work, I got a call from a cell phone that said Carson Van Vliet on the caller ID. Although I had told Carson exactly where my office was, his call made me raise my eyebrows as I answered, "Pauline Bradley." "Hi, Pauline," came the voice I had heard for 20 minutes or so a week ago. "This is Carson Van Vliet. I just wanted to check with you to see if you got your test results. If it's none of my business, just tell me, but curiosity took over." I grinned. I'd have the same curiosity if I were in your shoes, and since you put me up to it, I'm waiting for you to tell me what it was. I don't have the results yet. I should have them today or tomorrow. If you give me an email address, I can send them to you. We chatted amicably for another 10 minutes. As I hung up the phone, I felt my face turn red. Jean, one of the secretaries at work and a good friend of mine, walked in shortly after I hung up. You look completely detached with a blush on your face, she laughed, when I apparently didn't notice her at my desk for a few seconds. Oh, sorry. I was just thinking about the problem, was my lame reply. More like you were daydreaming after your afternoon nap, she laughed, and then started talking to me about the memo she was transcribing for me. The LabCorp report was emailed to me Tuesday morning after I gave them my credit card information over the phone to pay the $300 surcharge. The report also contained an analysis. To quote part of the analysis, 2 extraneous components were detected in the soda sample we analyzed. These were mifepristone and misoprostol, but in a more concentrated form than they are commonly sold. That combination of drugs is commonly used for chemical abortions, although they are not safe after 10 weeks of pregnancy. I squeezed my eyes shut and almost fainted. I had to reread what I had written 3 times before I understood. Not only was Jerry trying to terminate our baby's pregnancy, but since I was over 10 weeks pregnant, it was dangerous for me as well. For some reason, the first person I contacted was Carson. I sent him a text that read, "The foreign substances are mifepristone and misoprostol. I am over 10 weeks pregnant. Please call me on my cell phone." Since it was a text message, he had my cell phone number. I went and sat in our break room for 15 minutes gathering my thoughts. As I was about to go home, I had texted my supervisor that I wasn't feeling well, mentally and emotionally. My cell phone buzzed. It was Carson. Without even saying hello, he said, "I'm sorry, Pauline. You need to search your house to see if there's anything else there and then get out of there." In my annoyance, I hadn't thought of that. "You're right, Carson. I'm going home now. Good luck, Pauline, and call me if you need anything else." I thanked him and then headed for my car. 15 minutes of reflection allowed me to return to my usual definitive self, and I set off on my mission. After an hour of searching in the most logical places, I started looking where Jerry would never have thought I would look. I finally found materials that I was sure were mifepristone and misoprostol. I was sure of this because they were in a tackle box in the garage, probably in a place Jerry was sure I would never look, and where the drugs had no reason to be. I took a picture of the drugs in the box, and wearing a rubber glove, put them in a plastic bag, sealed the bag, took a picture of it, and then put the bag in my purse. I was about to close the box when the garage door started to open. "Jerry's early for some reason," I muttered to myself, and rushed into the house. I managed to get into the house before the garage door opened enough for him to see me, but then I realized that I had moved the tackle box from its previous place and hadn't closed it, so when Jerry came into the garage, he couldn't help but see it. For the first time in our relationship, I was scared of Jerry. Instinctively, I went to our guest room and hid in the closet under a couple of spare blankets. I called Carson. He answered on the first ring. I told him about my situation and then asked, "Did you really mean it when you said you'd help?" I don't want to dial 911 right now, but for the first time in my life, I'm scared of Jerry. Can you help? I couldn't believe I was asking a guy I'd known for less than 2 weeks to help in a situation like this, but I was impressed by his empathy and I didn't want to admit anything more to myself. He said blandly, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Keep your head down," and then cut the conversation short. I heard Jerry moving around the house and calling my name. I was sure he'd looked in the guest room, but he hadn't looked in the closet. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life, if you can call it long, before I heard the doorbell ring and Jerry came down the stairs, obviously to answer the door. As soon as I heard Carson's voice, I climbed out of the closet and ran down the stairs. Jerry was just about to ask who Carson was and tell him I wasn't there, even though my car was there, when I rushed to the door and started to make my way past a startled Jerry. He reached out and grabbed my shoulder. "Where are you going?" he asked. "And why is my tackle box open? And who is that guy?" Such were his 3 questions, asked at a rapid pace. "I have a doctor's appointment, so let me go," I replied, trying to pull my hand away, but he held it tight. "Answer my questions," he barked angrily. Carson barked back. "Let her go! You're clearly hurting her and she just as clearly wants to leave." "Go away," Jerry said and shoved Carson with his free hand. I don't know exactly what happened next. By the time I tried to watch closely, Jerry was lying on the ground, moaning and groaning, and Carson's eye was burning and there was blood on his right arm. This despite the fact that Carson is about 6 feet tall and weighs about 180 pounds, and Jerry is 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighs about 230 pounds. Apparently, Jerry loosened his grip on my hand. Carson took my right hand, it was trembling, and asked, "Do you have somewhere to go?" "No, I'm sure I could stay with my friend Angela, but she's out of town tonight." "Then come to my house. No shenanigans on my part," he grinned, "until she gets back." At a complete loss, I nodded my head, yes, and he said, "Follow me." I got in my car and followed his Corvette as it slowly pulled out of our neighborhood. As we drove, my phone rang and I answered it via Bluetooth. "Hi again, Pauline. You should probably call the neighbors and check on Jerry's condition. He wasn't unconscious, but he may need medical attention." Who is this superhero guy? I asked myself. Our neighbors to the west, the Hutchins, retired and always at home, promised to check on Jerry and let me know. After asking the neighbors to check on Jerry and stopping in front of Carson's little house, I used my phone to make sure the video from Ring's doorbell was uploaded to the cloud and copied the footage of the porch confrontation onto my phone. By the time I got out of the car and walked up to the porch of Carson's house where he was waiting for me, I was surprisingly calm. "Are you okay?" he asked with a concerned look. "I think so, but I couldn't have done it without your help. However, I'm not sure I'll be able to stay here. You can get a hotel if you want, but Jerry can use your credit card information to track you. Does he have an app to track your phone?" "No, I'm pretty sure he doesn't have an app to track his phone, but you're right about the credit card trail," I replied. "Let's do the same thing we did the night I drove you home when we first met. Take a picture of me holding the license in front of the house and send it to Angela and someone else. At the same time, ask Angela if you can stay with her when she gets back." "You're full of good ideas," I grinned, and then did just that. After Carson let me into his house, he said, "Here's my guest bedroom. The TV in my little living room has an understandable remote. You can eat any food you find. I have 2 more presentations to make to doctors today that I can't get out of, but I'll be back by 5:45. I have some takeout menus in the kitchen if you want to call me for dinner. Take your pick." "Thank you so much," I said, somehow on the verge of tears. "You have no idea how much you've helped me." When Carson saw that I was about to have torrents of water, he said, "You're welcome," hugged me, and then said, "See you before 6 p.m., and turned to leave. After he left, I realized that I was falling in love with him. I felt at home and watched daytime TV for the first time ever. I had been watching some mindless soap opera, trying not to think about Jerry or Carson for 2 different reasons, for about half an hour when I got a call from Angela. With great difficulty, I explained the whole situation to her. She was shocked and bluntly advised me to divorce the bastard and call the police. She even gave me the phone number of a divorce lawyer she knew in Orca. I was emotionally drained after talking to her, but no more than 10 minutes later my sister called and I had to tell her all over again. By the time the call was over, I had nothing left to go on, and I passed out rather than fall asleep in a chair in the living room with the TV on. The next thing I remember is Carson gently shaking me while pressing the remote to turn off the TV. "Are you okay?" he asked. I smiled at him. "Yeah, I was just woken up because I told Angela and my sister my horror story," I replied, trying unsuccessfully to smile. "Let's have dinner. Italian, Greek, and Chinese are the top 3 choices at the local restaurants with delivery," he continued. "Chinese is good," I replied, getting up and walking with him to the kitchen to look over the delivery menu. We talked about everything but Jerry before and during the meal. After we ate, he took out the trash, and I loaded the dishwasher. I told him about the voicemail I received from my neighbors, the Hutchins, whom I had contacted, and informed him that other than his pride and bloody nose, Jerry was fine. I then told Carson what my sister and Angela had told me. They both said I should file for divorce immediately and call the police. What do you think, Carson? He raised his eyebrows and then slowly, without looking me in the eye, replied, I'm not an impartial party. I don't think I should answer. Why are you impartial? I asked in surprise. He took a deep breath and then finally looked me in the eye. Because I'm partial to you, and if you divorced him, I'd be diligent in pursuing you, he coined, and then broke eye contact again. After a long pause, I said, But I'm pregnant by another man. I'm about to get fat, and you're a very desirable guy who can get just about any woman you want. I've seen you a couple times in town and once at a charity event, and you looked as stunning as you did then, and you look even better now. If you divorced Jerry, I might turn into your stalker. I couldn't help but smile, feeling my ego being stroked. Then, as we looked into each other's eyes, I asked him, Put your prejudices as far away as possible and tell me what you would say to any other woman in my situation. He thought for a long time without breaking eye contact before he said, I would divorce him, but I wouldn't rule out going to the police to make the divorce as easy as possible. After a pause, I smiled. You're right, that's what I would do. At that moment, my cell phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Jerry. That's him, I said to Carson. Shall I answer it? Yes, he replied, only don't give him any information as to where you are. But there's no reason not to tell him your plans. I did as suggested. I answered the phone. You tried to abort my baby by putting drugs in my soda. Not only do I have a witness, but I found drugs in your tackle box where I assume you didn't think I would look. I'm filing for divorce, and if you don't make it easy for me, I'm going to go to the police. There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds, then Jerry spoke. You've got it all wrong. Someone planted the drugs and your witness is wrong. And that's all you got? I hummed. You'll be served with a subpoena next week, and if you don't sign it within a week of being served, I'll go to the cops and you'll tell them your story. Then I interrupted the call. Carson smiled. I smiled back. Then I yawned. I suddenly realized that despite my afternoon nap, I was exhausted physically, emotionally, and mentally. Sorry for the bad company, but I need to get into bed and pass out. I only have one bathroom, but why don't you take a shower in it? I put 2 fresh towels in, and I left you a t-shirt that's big enough for me so you can use it as a nightgown. What time should I get you up tomorrow morning? 7 is too early? No, 7 is, I smiled. The bathroom is between your room and mine. Jack and Jill's, he smiled. I stood up, walked over to him, gave him a quick kiss on the lips, smiled, and without another word, headed to the guest bedroom. I woke up in the middle of the night from a dream about Carson making love to me when I was 8 months pregnant. I almost got up and went to his room to do it, but I was able to resist and fell back asleep a few minutes later. Around 8 a.m. the next morning at breakfast, he only had cold cereal, but that was fine with me. I was in the same clothes I had on yesterday. I need to stop by my house to change and pack a bunch of stuff, I told Carson in between. Want to help? He inquired. No need, I replied. I called the neighbors at 7:30. They're up early, and they assured me Jerry had already left. I'll talk to Angela after I get to work. We chatted about nothing in particular, and as I was about to leave, Carson said, You should test what you found in the tackle box to see if it's what we think it is. Given my knowledge of pharmaceutical sales jobs, it looks like it, but since it's unopened packaging, you should test it. Keep half of it and test the other half. Good idea, I said. As he walked me to the door, I turned around, walked right up to him and said, Thank you so much again, you're my hero. Then I gave him another quick kiss on the lips and walked out the door. You have my t-shirt, he said with a laugh following me. Yeah, so at some point you're going to have to find me to get it back, I muttered back. Got in my car and drove off. The next 10 days went by quickly. I expedited the testing of the materials, and they turned out to be mifepristone and misoprostol, as expected, but in a concentrated form that the lab hadn't seen before. I went with Angela to the divorce attorney she recommended, and, so as not to embarrass Jerry too much, I asked him to come to our home instead of work. I simply asked for a 50-50 property split, no alimony and no child support, although I asked the attorney to attach a waiver of parental rights to the divorce papers. Without comment, I also attached 2 lab test reports to the papers. Since Jerry can be stubborn as a mule sometimes, I was pleasantly surprised that he signed all the documents and returned them to my attorney. Had I gone to the police, it could have ended badly for him. As soon as my lawyer got her hands on the signed papers, she called me. It was Friday evening. I told Angela I was going on a date. I probably should have called ahead of time, because when I pulled up to Carson's house, there was a woman there. She was tall and attractive. Carson unabashedly introduced her. Her name was Jennifer Masters, to me as one of his employees. He then pretended to wait for me and told her that they could continue their conversation on Monday because he was helping me with a legal problem. Jennifer didn't look pleased, but hugged Carson goodbye and left, without saying goodbye to me, although I didn't expect her to. As soon as Carson saw her leaving, I said, "I'm sorry to interrupt you. Jennifer is a very attractive woman." He turned to me and said, "While she may want a relationship with me, I don't want one with her. I have someone else in mind." He made this last statement while moving his eyebrows up and down. Then he cheerfully continued, "So to what do I owe this visit?" "I have to thank you in the best way I know how," I replied with a big grin and rushed over to him, wrapping my arms around his neck and kissing him hard on the lips. I don't know exactly what happened for the next indeterminate amount of time. All I know is that I ended up on Carson's bed with no clothes on. Then we made love to him. However, I do remember for sure that in full consciousness, I was once again lying face to face with Carson, and we were smiling at each other. "You're a real handsome man," I grinned. "Not only did you save me and my baby girl, but you're wonderful in bed as a lover." The next morning, I tried to cover up my pregnant body. It was now clearly visible. But Carson wouldn't do it. "You're even more beautiful pregnant than when I've seen you before," he said before kissing me. I made us an omelet, and he toasted a couple bagels and poured orange juice. After we ate, we sat on the couch in his living room, me sitting on his lap. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Last night I thanked you for saving me. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me, especially given my condition, but I hope you'll remember that I was grateful." "Bullshit," he grinned. "You know I want a relationship with you, and unless you're a first-rate actress, you want one with me, too. The sex last night wasn't just a thank you. You really wanted it. If things work out, I have no problem adopting your child, and hopefully you and I will have more children. If you're not interested in me, you'll have to end the relationship yourself. I'm not going to do that." Looking into his cobalt blue eyes, I realized he was telling the truth. I kissed him deeply. Except when one of us went out of town after that first time in Carson's bed. We slept together every night. We married 2 months after my divorce, and he legally adopted my daughter Brianna a month after she was born. He has never treated her any differently than our 2 boys we share. In fact, they complain that he likes her more than he likes them. I know that's not true. He just has a protective gene towards women that makes me like him more than I could ever imagine. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.